Hi, I'm Jim McKay with Emergency Management Magazine. David Paulison was appointed by President Bush in September 2005 to resurrect a sagging FEMA that absorbed a great deal of criticism for its sluggish response during Hurricane Katrina. Paulison comes to FEMA with more than 35 years of experience in emergency management, including a career as a paramedic and a firefighter. He served as fire chief in Miami-Dade, Florida, where he oversaw the Miami-Dade Urban Search and Rescue Task Force. There, he helped lead rescue efforts during Hurricane Andrew and the crash of ValueJet Flight 592. We caught up with Paulison at the recent National Emergency Preparedness Conference in Sacramento, California, and asked him about the future of FEMA.
We are changing the way we're going to respond to disasters. We're no longer going to wait for a local government to become overwhelmed or a state to become overwhelmed before FEMA moves in. Now, we're not coming in to take over, so don't misread what I'm saying. We want to be coming as a partner, standing there side by side with the local government and with the state. So if there's a gap to fill, we know what the needs are, and we can move those supplies or whatever they happen to need at that time, moved in very quickly, not waiting for something to fail before we respond.
Right. You talked about some of the restructuring within FEMA. Can you offer some specifics on how this is making it possible for you to respond more quickly and how this will affect the future?
The most important thing that we're doing is changing the culture of the organization and bringing in people who know what they're doing. Our regional directors are people with decades of experience dealing with disasters, and I'm using that same type of philosophy inside of FEMA, inside the Beltway in Washington, making sure that the people who are managing this organization are emergency responders who know what they're doing and have credibility out in the field, so they know where I want to go. They won't know I want a much more forward-leaning, much more nimble organization.
In terms of the funding issue, will there be any changes to the funding model or how the funds are distributed in the near future? Can we expect something along those lines?
If you're talking about the grants, we've got a pretty good process with the grants, but what we're doing now is looking at them very carefully, and also, like I brought up, I'm bringing a law enforcement advisor in to report directly to me. All those law enforcement grants doing what they need to do. I'm reaching out to different organizations. I'm going out to meet with them. I'm meeting with the IACP, I'm meeting with the state emergency managers, I'm meeting with local emergency managers. Are the grants accomplishing what they need to accomplish? If they're not, then we're going to change that grant process as we move along to make sure they're doing what they need to do.
Do you feel a need to re-engage with state and local governments to kind of recover some of the confidence that may have been lost in recent years?
No question about it. There's no question. We have got to rebuild the confidence of this organization, and I've got to earn the trust of the state and local governments and earn the trust of the American people. And I can only do that by proving how we're going to respond. Saying it over and over again is not going to make it happen. We're going to have to, the proof's in the pudding, so to speak, and that's what I'm going to do.
How can state and local governments participate in the evolution of FEMA? What can they do?
Well, they're participating in a couple of ways. One, we have the National Response Framework out there. I need those comments in. Is that framework what it needs to be? Does it accomplish what they think it needs to do? So we need to get the feedback on that. And two, we have our National Advisory Council. We have our regional advisory councils out there. We have a lot of people serving on that. That's going to help me get the right input that I'm going to do, or going to need to do. And the third piece of it is making sure that I get out in the field. I'm not sitting behind a desk in Washington. I meet with those state and local governments. I meet with the national emergency managers, the local emergency managers, chiefs of police, the Sheriff's Association, so I can get that very honest, no kidding feedback of how we're doing.
You mentioned the gap analysis program. Could you explain what that is for us?
We took New York's disaster plan to Joe Bruno, the local emergency manager from New York City, had put together a huge document. We worked with them to develop what we call a gap analysis, looking at a state, looking at those things like evacuation procedures, sheltering, food, water, the whole emergency management system, and identifying gaps. And we did every state from Texas to Maine. It's not perfect yet, but it surely gave us a clear insight on what each individual state needs if they have a disaster. Every state's needs are different. One size does not fit all. It doesn't make sense for us to move in teams to do help with evacuations in Florida because they know how to do that. We will do that with Louisiana. Florida may need something different. North Carolina may need something different. So the program was very successful, very well received by the states, and now what we're looking to do is roll it out to the rest of the country. In states like California have more of an earthquake problem than they would a hurricane problem, and so we need to tailor our response to the particular needs of the individual states.
You also mentioned engaging in partnerships with the private sector. Talk about that a little bit.
The private sector has a lot of expertise out there. Don't forget, the private sector owns about 80% of our critical infrastructures. And we in the past have not included them in our planning process. We have not included them in our exercises, and surely have not included them in our response capability. And we need to do that. So that's where we're reaching out to them, having them bring their expertise into our organization, us learning what their needs are, they're learning what our capabilities are, and again, bringing all these groups in as partners as we respond to disasters. If we do that, if we can make this happen, we're going to have a much better response than we've ever seen in this country.
And how can state and local governments be involved in that?
They have to do the same thing I'm doing. Take a particular city, they've got to make sure they look at their critical infrastructure, who owns them, how they can bring them into the planning process to protect those infrastructures, and how can they get that city back up and running again. And business plays a big part in that. One of the things that I learned after Hurricane Andrew was very clear to me that if the businesses don't come back, the community is not going to come back. So they have to be brought in as partners.
Great. Thank you for your time.
No.
Appreciate it.
Good questions. Thank you.